Hello, everybody. My name is Leah. I am the administrative assistant here with Africa Fire Mission, and I just want to welcome you all to today's training. We're really excited to have you all here today. It's going to be a really great training with Howard Cohen. He's taught us many times, and so we are really excited to welcome him back again today. It's going to be about leadership, and so I'm sure everyone's really excited about that. But before we dive into the actual material of everything, I just want to give a few reminders before we get started. First and foremost, most important one I'm sure that everyone cares about is the certificates. You do have to attend 70% of the meeting. That looks like 45 minutes usually if the meeting is an hour long, like it's set to be an hour. So you have to attend 45 minutes before you get the certificate, and the certificate name will be whatever name you see is you're logged on with right now. And so I know sometimes if you're on your phone, it logs on with like Echo 900 or whatever your phone name is. Sometimes it logs you on with that. And so if you want to change that to whatever name you want on the certificate, please do that now. It just makes it a lot easier for me. And then if you're watching with more than one person, please email me. That email is really helpful to keep track of things and make sure everyone gets their certificate, because everyone is more than welcome to watch in a group, but it's easier if I get the email. And so with all that being said, right before we start, I do just want to ask that everyone stays muted throughout. If you have any questions, you can type it in the chat or raise your hand and we will call on you then, but it just makes it a little bit cleaner for the audio for everyone else if you stay muted, as well as the recording, because this is a recorded session and I'm going to be posting it on our YouTube channel if you want to go back and watch those. But now I'm going to pass it off to our fire safety advocate, Jose, and he has a word of encouragement for you guys.
Thank you, Leah. Much appreciated. Thank you, Howard, for coming through. And thank you, the participants, to actually find time to come and participate in today's class. So today's encouragement is more like, this week we're celebrating several activities. And one activity that we're celebrating is World Mental Health Day. That was actually on Monday this week. It was a holiday in Kenya. And then number two, we're celebrating Fire Safety Week. So it's a very busy week. And for me today, I wanted to focus on the mental health segment. We as first responders, we really go through a lot. PSTD, our family issues, financial issues and all. And I'd want to encourage us in one of the Bible verses, in 1 John chapter 4, verse 16, not that one, sorry. In Philippians chapter 4, verse 6, it says, in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. That means you need to actually get to pray, So let me get to read it, the whole of it. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. If you're going through much in your lives as the first responder, don't be alone. Get to speak with somebody. Get to tell somebody, hey, this is what I'm going through. I went to that scene. I saw X, Y, and Z happen, and I'm scared. We are not heroes, So by you getting to speak, you get to help solve your issue or your problem. Yeah, because you know what? Keeping you close in your, you are more than enough when you get to speak. Yeah. And also in the middle of difficulty, it lies as an opportunity. You might know that through that difficulty that you're going through, there's an opportunity for you to become better, so that when somebody else needs an issue, faces that issue, you know how to solve it. So stay encouraged and don't let yourself be bogged down with a mental issue. Thank you so much. And let's go back to our next segment. Back to you, Leah.
Thank you so much, Jose. As you said, just this being mental health, or I'm sorry, not Mental Health Awareness Week, but that is always important to talk about is mental health. And it's something that as firefighters, I mean, I just have so much empathy for you guys because I don't experience that, but I see how hard you all work and I see the toll that it takes on you guys. And so thank you very much for speaking about that today. But I do want to now just pass it over to Howard. He is our presenter for the day. Thank you so much for coming, Howard. And yeah, it's off to you.
Hi, everybody. Let me, that's picture of me presiding over my daughter's wedding last summer. Let me get to the proper screen here. It's always a little tricky to make this thing work right. It doesn't like to do it. Something about this adjustment thing. Just bear with me. There's something about this. I've been having problems with this. There we go. And come down a little bit more. There we go. All right. Trust you guys can all see the screen that says Incident Command Strategies and Tactics. Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be back with all of you. I have to tell you right up front, I was not the one who was supposed to originally give this presentation. I am filling in for Chief Frank Montes de Ose. He's retired chief from Florida. He now currently lives in North Carolina, where he is responsible for some safety, some part of a safety department. I'm not exactly sure of his resume, but Chief Diose, his wife was recovering from a medical condition treatment, and he asked if I could fill in so that he could, because he was going to be with her in a place that wouldn't have great contact. So I say that by way of not exactly an apology, but it's a caveat. This is a presentation that Chief Diose put together. I've gone over it a few times. It's general information that I think that I be able to adequately present what he wants to share with you. But the good news is that next week he's doing the follow-up to this, which is, so this is sort of like the introduction to what an incident commander needs to keep in mind, and then he's going to take it to the next level. So thank you to all of you. Thank you to African Fire Mission for providing me with this opportunity to teach you, and thank you, Chief Frank Montes de Ose. Funny kind of small world story I should tell you. I have not personally met Chief Diose yet. I'm looking forward to doing it one of these days. So we don't live in the same part of the country. But when we did first connect online through another program we're both part of, he said to me, "Are you the Howard Cohen who was my trainer when I was in the executive leadership course?" I wasn't. Chief Diose has a few years on me and lots of years more experience on it. But it was funny that we connected because I had the same name as one of his first mentors. Small world, not particularly relevant to anything except it is part of my connection. So today we're going to look at incident command strategies and tactics. This is a pretty broad cover, a broad topic. What I'm going to do is introduce you to three primary areas of concern for the incident commander. But I also want to mention that these are the same three primary concerns of all firefighters when you first arrive on the scene, and to a certain degree, as you continue to remain active on the scene. So at any given time, you have the potential to be the first person on the scene. In that case, at least in our system, the first person on the scene who has the highest rank is the incident commander until the next highest ranking person arrives. So that could easily be any one of you, depending on how your brigades respond to calls. So whether or not you're the actual, chief or deputy chief or brigade chief or whatever the title is in your brigade, you may well find yourself in this position. So, and in any case, no matter what, you're still going to want to be concerned to these three primary areas. So, the topics we're going to look at in the course of covering this, as you see them on my screen, are the same things that every firefighter is paying attention to. Size up and safety, firefighting operations, and firefighting support. No difference whether you're a new firefighter or the chief. These are your three primary areas of concern. The difference is that the chief or the incident commander, you have to be processing all three of these categories and their subtopics all the time. But when you're a firefighter on the scene, once you get your assignment, you're going to narrow down your focus to that assignment until you get your next assignment. But in any case, in the back of your mind, you want to be paying attention to anything, because everyone on the fire ground is essentially a safety officer, is essentially in a position to point things out, because it is impossible, as you know, for any one person to have a constant 360-degree overview of what's happening on the fire ground. So we're going to start with number one on the category, size up and safety. And by the way, I should tell you, as I'm going through this presentation, if I bounce around or seem to repeat certain topics, it's not because of lack of organization on my part, although that may be part of it, but it's mainly because there's a lot of repetition, and repetition comes up because the themes occur, the topics occur in different categories in different ways. But also from an educational point of view, repetition is a really good thing. Tuck this away as you're training new firefighters. When you repeat things, you're reinforcing it. But what you're doing is you're allowing your students to have time to process what you've presented once, and then perhaps come up with a question that they weren't ready to ask initially when they were first received the information. So safety and size up and safety. That's number one. Safety is always your overriding philosophy. But size up. And size up begins with the initial tone. No matter where you are, when you get the word, and however you get your notification that there's an incident unfolding, that's when your size up begins. Well, you're not on the scene, so how could you size up? You're probably thinking, well, where is the incident happening? What's going on? Or what's the location? Are you familiar with it? What's there? Does it sound like it's a school? Does it sound like it's a building with elderly people or a medical place? What is, your size up begins as soon as you hear it. Is there going to be a problem getting there because of traffic? Is there going to be a problem? Are you going to have resources for when you get there? You're asking yourself all these questions based on what information you receive initially. So, and in the process of doing that, what you're thinking is safety. How am I going to make this a safe and secure site for anyone who's impacted and for my firefighters? So when you're sizing up, here are your primary factors. This is, especially if you're a chief, but again, if you're the first person on the scene, you're going to be thinking these things too. Firefighting strength. Do I have enough firefighters to handle this thing? Am I going to have to call in mutual aid? I don't know how it works in your various fire districts. There's a lot of different fire districts represented here, but in my fire district, if we know that we have a structure fire, and the tone comes in, confirmed, structure fire, we automatically call for mutual aid. Our philosophy is better to have them there and send them home than if you don't need them, than to realize you need them and have to wait for them to get there. So what's your firefighting strength? That's part of your size up. And of course, it impacts your safety of your scene. Occupants. In other words, what is the type of occupancy of the building that that you're responding to? Occupancy could be people. Is it a warehouse? Is it a factory? What is that building used for? numbers. Is it nighttime and it's a school and there's no kids in the school? Is it a nursing home? What is the age of the kinds of people you'll find in the building? These impact your decision making in order to make it a safe site and a safe experience, a safe response. When you get to the scene, you're there. Is there a way for people to escape if they need to? If not, how are you going to help them get out? All these are parts of your thought process as you're arriving on the scene, as you're processing the information you're getting. You want to understand what kind of building construction you're dealing with. I'm not going to go through the different kinds of building constructions here. And of course, in your fire districts, they're going to range from high-rise modern buildings to pretty simple structures, wood structures. So, but you need to pay attention to those things. Is it a building under construction versus something that's been up for a while? All that's part of your size up. Are there exposures to other buildings, exposures to cars, exposures to fuel depots, things like that? Now, typically for us, we're also asking the question, what's our water supply? Lots of times we have fire hydrants. If we don't have fire hydrants, we need to think about, is there a place for us to load our tankers? And in every fire district, you need to think about, where's your water supply? Do you have to go back to your firehouse to resupply your tankers? What's the route like? Yeah, you're going to have the tankers going to have to take. All that's part of your size up. And then once you're on the scene, size up includes the fire behavior. What's going on with it? Where is it located? What's burning? Has the building vented? All these are factors in fire behavior. Any one of these categories, we could spend a whole 45, 50 minutes going into much greater depth. But you, as the incident commander, need to be addressing these things in real fast time as you're arriving on the scene. Okay, let's talk a little bit about fire scene analysis. You arrive on the scene and you're doing your size up. Size up, first and foremost, is a 360. You want to make a 360-degree round turn, trip around whatever's burning, if you can. Not always possible for all kinds of reasons. Maybe really a big building and you can't get around to the backside. There might be fences that block your way, but you want to try and get as much of a 360-degree view of what's happening. If you're lucky enough to have drones, getting a view from up above is also really helpful. So in your size up, you're looking to see if you can identify what's the location of the fire, where's the seat of the fire, if you can identify it. Sometimes you can't because it's inside the building and it's hard to get to. Really all depends on the size of the structure and the kind of structure. When you get there, are you going to have to do a rescue? Can you do rescues? Are you going to go right into firefighting tactics? The rescue scenario, I've done a training called go, no go. How do you identify whether or not there's survivable spaces? Can you get firefighters into those spaces? Are there likely to be people in those spaces? Do you see people who are calling for help and you're going to need to rescue? You have to balance your rescue efforts with the actual firefighting, because you can't be pouring water onto the same spot where your firefighters are going to try to execute a rescue. You're also determining, will I have enough firefighters for this? And do I have the right equipment? And as part of that assessment, you need to determine what's going on with the weather. Do I have strong winds? Is there anything that's going to affect the whole firefighting scenario? Is this extremely hot? Am I going to need more staff because folks are going to get tired too fast? Again, going down a little bit deeper into the question of water supply. What are you using? Hydrants, water shuttles. Where are you shuttling from? And I already talked about it with regards to building. I've talked about it, occupancy. And let's take into consideration your size and height. You want to make sure that you don't have your firefighters stationed or your apparatus station, and what would be the collapse zone. So all these things are going into your initial fire scene analysis. So you're in charge. You're trying to get as much understanding of the situation as possible. In an ideal world, you're going to get a ton of information and you're going to have a lot of good data for making decisions. But in the real world, there's going to be a lot that you're not going to know. So you're going to do your best to get as much as you can through as many sources of reliable information. Where does information come from? Well, it comes from your firefighters on the ground. It comes from citizens who are there who might have some information to share with you. It comes from however you get get dispatched from your information. And of course, it comes from all your observations. And as an incident commander, you want to have a team of other officers around you who are feeding you information to help you be able to make the good set of decisions. With all that data, you want to establish some objectives. We already talked about, are you firefighting? Are you implementing a rescue? Are you going to firefight, do an interior firefighting? Or is this going to have to be an entirely defensive outside firefighting? Or will it be a transitional kind of fire attack? All these things are going through your mind as you're with this information. Once you just kind of get an idea what your objectives are, now you're going to start to develop a strategy. Where am I sending a crew? What crew's going where? So forth and so on. And then, of course, you implement your plan and you're constantly evaluating because the fire is constantly changing. Do you need to change it? How do you need to change it? Do you need to move firefighters to a different part? Do you need to move more firefighters to a different part of the burning structure? All this is what you're juggling. You're constantly processing all this information. Now, let's shift to talking about firefighting operations. Here are the three main things you want to be concerned about. Number one, fire confinement. Fire confinement, this is the definition of fire confinement. It's actions taken to confine a fire to a given area, area of present involvement by preventing the spread of the fire into an uninvolved area. In other words, how do you keep the fire from spreading? You want to confine it to where it is as best you can. How are you going to do that? There's a variety of tactics that you could employ, but that's your first thing. How do I confine the fire so it doesn't become a bigger and more dangerous fire? Exposure protection. This means, how do you protect anything that's near this burning building or burning object? It could be a car, it could be a trash can, doesn't have to just be a building. But how do you protect other exposed property and areas near the fire from becoming involved? Again, there are a variety of tactical things that you could do. This is not the training to get into the tactical operations, but as the incident commander, you're thinking about this too. How am I going to protect those cars and the other cars in the parking garage? How am I going to protect the houses next door to the one that's building? And then thirdly, it's fire extinguishment. How the heck are you going to put this fire out, right? So you're doing your best to confine the fire, and now you have to extinguish it. And to do that, as you know, you have to either remove the fuel, remove the, douse it with water, remove the heat. You got to put it out. So I want to go back up to fire confinement for just a little bit. Earlier this year, we had a webinar presented by an academic from South Africa, from a university. She had been doing research on the fire spreads in I forget what the technical term is, but those very large settlements that are just pretty much undeveloped and don't have a lot of road access and utility services, which, as all of you know, there are a lot of those. But she talked about how, in her fire investigation of this, how the efforts to try and confine the fire when it so easily can spread from one place to another, one structure that's not very well equipped to resist fire. So fire confinement is very important, and it's also related goes back to our fire investigation. So let me move on. Now, I want to talk a little bit about exposure So as you know, there's basically three ways that fire can kind of jump from one place to another. A little illustration here kind of highlights it. So you can have radiation. Radiation is that there's so much heat coming off this building or this project that it causes it all gets absorbed into whatever is near to it until it gets to the point where it starts off gassing and then it ignites. So that's radiation. So somehow you have to interfere that. Direct flame contact, which of course, if it's directly impinging upon whatever is nearby, that will cause it. But here's another one, and a lot of you who are in more rural areas probably see a lot of this. Embers, or a little fire, sparks flying off from the fires. I don't know if some of you did the fire investigation class that I taught a while back, where I showed pictures. I showed a video of these birds, these kites in Australia that would literally take embers and drop them into the grass in order to cause grass fires to chase out the animals so that small animals, so they could catch them to eat. So fire embers coming off of fires rapidly spread fires, and then we have to protect that. That's particularly a particular concern with regards to when we're dealing with wildland fires. All right. So following up your initial size up, you want to determine, do I need additional resources? And you want to have ongoing information about what's happening. You want updates. You want to give progress reports. You want to be hearing from your officers on the ground. What's going on wherever they're. If you've got an officer on the C side of the building and your position on the A side of the building, you want to hear from that officer on a regular basis. You want to be hearing from folks what's happening however you can. You need as much information coming in. By the way, related to this sort of the movement of information, one of the techniques that incident commanders in the United States are taught is to station yourself in one place. One chief that I was learning from he says he makes a box for himself, a 10 by 10 box, and he stands inside that box and he has everything that he or she needs in order to process this whole the incident that's unfolding, and that's where the chief stays. So everybody knows they need to get to the chief, whether they don't have a radio, but they need to run a message up. They know where the chief will be. They don't have to go running around looking for the chief. So station yourself so you can get the information that you need. However, you receive information from your firefighters and your officers on the ground. All right, let's go back into this is where I talked about. We kind of look like we're kind of jumping around a little bit. So we're talking more about firefighting support. Are you going to have to do a rescue? By the way, as you all know, rescue doesn't mean only when you first get there and some civilian needs a rescue. Rescue could mean, do I have a Mayday situation? Mayday, do I have a firefighter who's down someplace? What's going on? So situations are not linear. Fire situations are never linear. So keep in mind that at any time, a rescue could be something you're thinking about. Although, obviously, first things we want to do, if there's civilians who need to be rescued, that's our first priority, to rescue them in a safe way as possible, given that what we're doing is inherently risky. Remember, we're willing to risk a lot to save a lot. We're willing to risk a little to save little, and we're not willing to risk anything to save nothing. So keep that in mind. All right, so we've done rescue, and part of the firefighting support is ventilation. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, but ventilation is opening up the building in order to allow smoke and heat to exit. Ventilation is more complicated than how I just kind of simply described it, because it has to be very much coordinated with water, and you have to know where your firefighters are where you do it, and you have to vent in the right way, and your timing is all important. But ventilation is a way in which you support the firefighters and support the firefighting effort. And then as you're making some progress, we shift into what's called overhaul. And overhaul is when you have crews going looking for hot spots. Those are spots that have the potential to flame back up, looking for fire hidden behind walls, hidden, buried under, underneath sort of piles of stuff, looking to make sure that there's no spots that are going to flame up and maybe catch firefighters, cut off their exits or just rekindle the fire. So another aspect of your firefighting support is under the rescue category. This assumes now that you don't necessarily see somebody yelling for help, but you have reasons to believe that there might be some people that you need to search for. So you're going to do first a primary search, and that's a relatively quick search, but a thorough quick search. And then eventually you're going to go back and do a secondary search to make sure that you didn't miss anybody. And the primary search is where you have to get to in the spots that are the most risk, if there's somebody there, and then you follow that up. And then, of course, part of your firefighting support and part of your rescue is providing for rescued occupants. So do you have medical crew on hand? If you don't have medical crew on hand, do you have resources within your fire apparatus and on your fire team to provide support for folks, whether it's medical support or more emotional and psychological support? So go into a little bit more detail of the primary search. Again, this is what you as the incident commander want your firefighters to be doing. You want to make sure they're doing this. And of course, you as a firefighter, this is what you want to have in mind. You want to rapidly search all areas that can be entered for that primary search. You're observing for key elements for firefighting strategy that you can report back to the IC. In other words, you're working your way through. What do you see? You see that there's an entrance in the back. Do you see there's stairways to the basement? What do you see that could be useful for the incident commander? Because remember, incident commanders don't see what's inside the building. You guys do. And you have to report that back because that information will help develop strategies that may be useful for firefighting, but it also may be really useful if there's a Mayday situation. Okay, you find victims, you got to get them out. You have to plan for that. It's not easy. How are you going to get them out? You have to be able to communicate this information. You clear the space. You want to make sure that you let everybody know it's all clear. And finally, you're going to request medical care and transport for victims if that's available. I should have said this from the beginning. I'm going to say it now. Everything I'm presenting here, consider as general principles. Whatever your fire brigade, fire department, fire company, whatever are your policies, that's what you follow. You may have policies based on experiences that you've had and your fire conditions that are different, and you might do things different. Always refer to your SOGs or SOPs. Those are standard operating guidelines or standard operating procedures. Not a whole lot of difference between the two terms, but always refer to yours, but keep these general principles in mind. All right, continuing in firefighting support. Now we're going to talk about venting. Again, I'm repeating myself. Some of this is things I've already said to you. When you vent, you're venting for life safety. If you can get the toxic fumes out of there, and there's a victim trapped, you're making life better for them. You're also making life better for your firefighters who might have to be in there, right? Because if you can vent and vent it properly, it releases heat out through wherever you vented and the toxic fumes with it. It has the potential to stabilize the incident. However, if you vent wrong, you have the potential to make the situation far worse than it was. Venting also has the potential to preserve property, but as I just said, do it wrong and it can have the opposite effect. So venting has a lot of value, but it has to be done properly and it has to be done with coordination. There's probably a little bit more detail than we need to do in this training, but it was part of Chief DeOse, so I'm gonna continue with it. We'll talk a little bit about some ventilation tactics. So first, as the incident commander, you're going to have to make these decisions. Are you going to use vertical ventilation, horizontal, or some combination? So let me, somewhere along there, I have some pictures of those. I'll show it to you. We're coming up on those. So before we get to my graphics, your ventilation could be natural. It's you open a door and there's a breeze and it blows in, or it could the structure could self-ventilate, which means it's burned a hole through the ceiling, or it's blown out a window. And of course, ventilation could also come from forced fans of some sort. I don't know if you followed the problems they had with fires in Greece the last couple of years. One of the big problems that they have with fires there, which probably is a problem that many of you have experienced, is that there's so much wind that you end up with this natural ventilation happening, for better or for worse. Wind could blow and make the fires bigger, but sometimes they could blow them out. So Greek firefighters had a lot of problem with the winds because the islands are pretty windy. There's some other mechanical methods for venting. One is using fog streams. Again, tactic, if you're not familiar with what that is, and you need to go back to your to your department and study that more. If the building has heating or air conditioning, that might, and it's operable, that might help with venting. And then there's what we call negative pressure or positive pressure using fans. And I'll show you some pictures of those to give you a picture of that. So here are some examples, just visual examples of these different kinds of pressures. So positive pressure, you're blowing from the outside in, you're blowing into the structure, and presumably there is an opening on the outside or on the, in the roof or someplace. So you're blowing in and it goes up and out. And then you could do the same with a negative method where the fan is pointing outward, so it's pulling the pressure out. The positive pressure is building positive pressure inside the structure so that it forces the smoke out. The negative pressure is that it's kind of like sucking it out. And then this is just horizontal mechanical. It's just showing you putting a fan up in a window by using a ladder. And then you could use your hose. This is, to create pressure to push the air out. So you follow the air becomes entrained with the water and flows out. Again, probably a little too more detailed than we need for here. And again, examples of negative pressure, this time blowing it out a window, in this case, blowing out a door. You've probably all done these things. Somebody burns toast or popcorn and, you put in a fan to blow the smoke out. That's what this is all about. Again, more detail about venting. I'm going to go through this kind of quickly because this really is not a training on venting techniques. But again, as the incident commander, you want to have these sorts of things in mind. You want to just be real careful where you place, if you're opening up a part of the structure to vent, you need to be real careful where it is. You want to be careful in terms of timing. If you open it too soon, you might just be letting in air and that'll feed the fire. If you open it in the wrong place, you might draw fire towards victims, or you might be overriding any attempt to confine the space. You might be opening up into an area that there's nothing there. And you might, you need to make the size opening. One large one, as they say, is better than two small ones. The important thing with venting is that if you have poor communications and poor coordinations, and you're endangering both the crews and the victims. That's the main thing I want to say about venting. And again, that's something we can do a whole training on. And I'm gonna skip this slide again because it's just more detail about the venting, and we would really need to talk more about how often you use venting in your structures and in what way, and how to make it useful. And I don't want to spend this. We're kind of running out of time, so I'm going to move through this one. Getting back to the whole overhaul of your firefighting support. Again, this is kind of a repetition of what I said before. So remember what I said about the value of repeating. You're extinguishing all smoldering contents. You're checking for hidden fires. You're looking for hot spots. You're checking for fire extension, and it's a fire that's like crawled, worked through a hole in the wall and has gone someplace else. You're looking for voids where there might be fire, and you're looking for anything that might be have been overlooked. So overhaul is very important. I do want to say about overhaul, for us as firefighters, one of the biggest risks to us comes during overhaul because we tend not to want to wear our breathing apparatus when we're doing overhaul. And in fact, it's a really dangerous time for us because there's all kinds of toxic fumes. So keep that in mind. If you're not the chief, but you're the incident commander, but now the chief shows up or someone higher ranking comes up to you, you're going to have to transfer command, handing off to the next commanding officer, right? So this is just some of the information you want to share with the next ranking officer who's taking over. Initial location, fire extension, what you've done, what resources have you used? If there's victims, how many? What's their situation? How's the progress going? Is there a rehab station? What's happening there? What other resources were called for? What do you still need? And you have to make sure everybody knows now who's in command. There's nothing more confusing than being on the fire ground and you're calling, you're radioing the incident commander and you don't know who you're talking to. They don't know who's in charge anymore. So you got to make sure you communicate that. Then I come into the home stretch here. When you're that incident commander, whether you're there just as the first arriving, firefighter, or you're the incident highest ranking person in charge of the scene, you want to think of these 3 rules. What do I have? Where is it going? And what do I need? So what do I have? That includes firefighters, firefighting apparatus and material. And what's the situation? What am I looking at? Am I looking at a conflagration, a major fire? Am I looking at content burning in one room? What do I have? So what do I have it's a very open-ended question. Where is it going? It is the fire. Where's it going? What am I doing? And then what am I doing to confine it? What am I doing to extinguish it? And last, you got to ask yourself, what do I need? As I said before, it is always better to ask for help and get it on the scene and not need it than it is to realize you need it and now you have to get it, because all the time spent getting your help is time the fire has to grow. So keep those 3 questions in mind. And again, you're the first person on the scene, but you're not the chief. You still got to be asking yourself these questions. All right. Always have a plan A and a plan B and a plan C. So plan A, these are your everyday operational tactics. These you've been drilling on over and over. So whether you're the incident commander as the first arriving officer, or the incident commander because you're the chief, you got to have a playbook that you're operating from. What's your plan B if there's an emergency, something goes haywire? That could be, there's a Mayday situation. Okay, we got to shift to plan B. Plan B might be, wait a second, there's stuff there we didn't know that was in that building. Now we have to shift plans. How fast can you shift plans? So you have to think, what's my plan B? And plan C is when I have a crisis. Mayday, collapse with firefighters trapped, or something that totally that you hadn't predicted. But as a famous Chief Brucini here from the United States used to say, if you can predict it, you can prepare for it. So your job as that incident commander is to always be thinking, what if? What could possibly happen that I can't, that's, you can say to yourself, all those things don't happen here, but if you can predict that it could happen, you can prepare for it because it could happen. Finally, A few last little notes I just want to, before I wrap up, and then I'll take questions. Don't trust occupants who say everyone is out of the building. You need to have your firefighters do searches. Just because people say, we think there's no one left in there, you know, you need to make sure. Fires are often won or lost based on the fundamentals employed at the fire. You need to always be working with your firefighters. And if you're not a chief, you need to be working with your crew on the fundamentals, because it's the fundamentals that make all the difference. When a tactic isn't working, change it. It is unlikely to get better if you keep doing the same thing. Don't be afraid to change tactics. And that means you have to have tactics that you can shift to if you need to, which means training. Training that you have to be able to respond to changing environments. Freelancing kills firefighters. By freelancing, I mean, if you're a firefighter who does your own thing and you don't follow the orders, or you just do whatever you think is the right thing, that's dangerous. It's dangerous to you and it's dangerous to other firefighters. We also call them rogue firefighters. We fight fires as teams. None of us can do it by ourselves. We've got to be in a team. And those of us who take off and do our own thing put ourselves and others at risk. This might not be, you know, this is pretty specific. If the roof is self-ventilated, don't send firefighters up. In other words, fires burn through the roof, assume it's not safe. Learn and practice situational awareness. Situational awareness is critical. That means learning to be as aware of what's going on around you at all times. One of the great exercises to do for practice with that is to have a situation, you're doing a live, you know, a drill where you have a situation where you're, you know, trying to execute some kind of rescue or something, and you have someone come up screaming and yelling at them, my baby, my child, help me. And so it creates distraction. It's a great drill to help develop situational awareness and stay focused. I don't know what you guys are doing about this now, but conducting a hot wash following all incidences means make sure you clean your gear. It gets into the whole thing about self-care and the problems of cancer and firefighting. Moving on, lastly, remember, safety always comes first. Safety of your firefighters, safety of citizens. Everyone comes home from fire calls. That's our goal. When you're on the perimeter of a roof, when you're walking around the perimeter, walk around the perimeter of a roof, don't cross over it. Perimeter is a lot safer. Always wear your PPE correctly. All of your PPE. Even if it's old PPE, it's going to be better than no PPE. So always wear it. And wear it properly. Strap your helmets, for example. Zip up your coats. Always wear it properly. If you're fighting interior, know your closest point to safety. Decon and wash after that, and wash as soon as you return to the station. That has to do with the toxins in your stuff. Downlines are always hot until confirmed otherwise. When you're acting as a backup, don't get caught between the vehicle and an object. Make sure your driver knows where you are, and know the collapse zone dimensions. These are all things, random notes just thrown out here at the end. And this is pretty much what Chief Frank Montes de Arce wanted to share with you. I hope I did justice to his presentation and what he hoped to give. I will say you should look forward to learning with him next week. He has a lot of experience as an incident commander, as a chief of a big fire department where he saw a lot more activity. So on that note, I want to say thank you. And as I always say, at all the end of my trainings, we don't rise to the occasion. We fall back on our training. Thanks for your attention. I'm going to close off the screen, take questions if you have them. And Leah, you can stop recording if you want. And I do see we have one hand up. I don't know if that's a question, if it's still a question. From Winslaso and Mustafa, you have questions. You go ahead and unmute if you have with your questions. Oh, sorry. You have to unmute, Mustafa. Ah, shit. Oh, sorry. I keep doing that to you. I mute you as soon as you unmute.
Yeah, all right.
Go ahead.
Mine is a question, but it's not targeting what you have taught us. Of course, it has been a very good lecture. It has benefited us a lot because it has given us an insight on how we can prevent accidents, how we can protect ourselves and the rest of the team at the incident scene. But my question is going to Leah, if she can hear me.
Yeah, of course.
Hello? Yes, I wanted to find out if you have issued certificate for last week's training.
Yes, I have.
I am sorry, I haven't received mine. I don't know what the problem is, but I attended almost the whole of the training, the whole of the 1 hour.
Yes, so we've been having some issues with people and their network cutting in and out, and so it's not saying that people attended the full 70%. And so I am talking with some other people right now about what we should do to handle the certificate situation. Because if it's not coming up on my end that you attended the full 70%, then I can't really do anything about that for right now. But you're not the only one having that complaint. And so if it continues being an issue, we might stop doing certificates altogether, or we might lower that 70% rate. But yeah, I hear you. I'm talking with my boss about that. So we're gonna get it figured out.
Okay. Because I don't know what happens with me, because there are a couple of trainings that I have attended, but I don't receive the certificate. So I just assume maybe there's a technical problem with my email. I don't know what, but I keep receiving emails. But
You cut out a little bit.
same, however, you're going. Yeah, sorry, there was an incoming call, but I understand you. When you have the problem sorted out, then we'll be waiting.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, do we have one other question before we end the training? I see that there's another hand raised.
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just wondering, we have talked about the incident commander. What happens if there's change of command or transfer of command at the incident?
Yeah, I touched on that towards the end. You have to communicate all the information that you have to the new incident commander, and you have to let everybody on the fire ground know that you're transferring command to the new incident commander. And I do want to say, though, that how you do this and you know, is somewhat dependent on your department, your brigade, fire brigade's you know, standard operating procedures or guidelines, and whether or not that includes, for example, communicating with dispatchers. You know, I don't know how much communication goes on between the fire ground and dispatchers. So again, that depends on, you know, your particular situation. But yeah, you need to transfer the command. For us, the system is whoever is the highest ranking officer becomes the incident commander, unless that incident commander, that person specifically tells the other person, no, you stay in command, you stay in charge. And that could happen because of any number of reasons. But if there is a change in command, you have to make sure that you transfer as much of the information that the new incident commander is going to need, and that you let everybody on the ground know that you're the new incident commander, as you transferred command.
Yes, thank you. Last question. How do you handle battle of supremacy at the fire ground, where you get the government, the military, the fire department is there, the local officials, the local area politicians? How do you handle such kind of a situation?
That's an interesting question, And I noticed my colleague Mike started to smile when you said that. So you know, in here, I don't know if this is categorical across the country in the United States, but in Vermont, where I am, the fire department is in charge of the fire scene, period. When the police chief, the police officers, they can come on the scene, but we have the authority to keep them off the fire ground. And now again, that might not be the same in every state, and I don't know how that would play out in your country. A politician, I will tell you, a politician would have nothing to say on the fire ground. I mean, they can say everything they want, but they have no authority. The authority on the fire ground belongs to the fire chief, or the highest ranking officer on the fire ground. And that actually holds true. Once the fire is out, if there's reason for fire investigation to happen and we need to wait for fire investigators to show up the next morning, as long as we have a firefighter on the fire ground, it is our scene. And the fire department, the chief and the fire department is the authority on that fire ground scene. Now, again, that may vary from state to state. And I will tell you, we stories come up all the time of spats between police officers and fire chiefs. Typically it's the chief is telling the police officer to get out of the way or something. The police officer takes some exception or something. But in general, the principle here is the fire department is in charge of the fire ground until they relinquish it, period. Mike, is that the same in Pennsylvania for you?
Yeah, that's sort of the way it's supposed to work. But I think maybe the better answer would be that you develop those relationships ahead of time and develop that good working relationship with the local police and with the local groups that would be there, so that you don't have those problems to begin with. If you don't have that good relationship, then it tends to be whoever has the biggest personality, right? Whoever tries to force themselves into being, the person in charge. But really, you want to, if you're in that leadership position, you want to try to develop that relationship ahead of time with the folks that are going to be there, so that you have that worked out, so that you don't have those personality conflicts.
Yeah, Benson, you're where did you go? Are you still on here, Benson?
I'm still there. I'm still there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How is it for you in your department? Your career, right?
Yes, I'm career. Yep.
Yeah. How's it the same?
So yeah, I was actually gonna respond on that. One is we do have a PIO and we do have an assigned person that everybody knows. The cops show up, the military shows up, whoever shows up, the PIO handles that. If the news shows up, we are not allowed as firefighters to speak to the news. You're just not.
Tell everybody what a PIO is.
Okay, so how do I even explain? PIO is a person that public informational officer. So there's somebody, public information officer, thank you. He's gonna be the one that's in charge of speaking to the news and speaking to anybody else that has a question about that fire. Or it doesn't have to be a fire, car accident, incident, whatever it is. If the PIO is not there, then the chief is responsible to speak on behalf of the organization. So that's one. Go ahead.
Designate that to somebody?
Yes, the chief can designate that to somebody, which sometimes can be the safety officer, but also you understand that the PIO, they're trained in what to say and not what to say. So you just don't want to delegate that to anybody to say things that they're not supposed to say, right? Also, Howard, as you talked about, when the chief shows up on scene to take over command, typically he's going to be outside of let's use the house as an example. The chief is going to be outside the house, right? Yep. He has a light on top of his truck. So everybody that sees that light, anybody that has a question has to go to the chief. They cannot come to me as the officer. They cannot go to the firefighter. The system is created that whoever has a question has to go to who is in command.
Can I just,
Go ahead.
I had talked about creating that box. That's where the chief stands. And
Correct.
I like that. I like that initial element of the light. So everybody knows, not only do the public who might want to approach the chief, but all the firefighters would know, having a light up.
Correct.
We didn't do that, but that's a good idea. But again,
Right.
it's the chief is positioned in a place where he can have as big a view as possible, and people come to him with the information. And
Also, if I may add as an example, Errol, you asked a question about how do you pass command. About 3 months ago, we talked a little bit about our terminology, which we call the blue card. Let's see if this makes sense. So when I arrive as the officer, when I arrive on a house fire, he is on a 2-story house fire. Here's how it's gonna sound. I'm gonna get on scene, and I'm gonna tell dispatch. I'm gonna say, and I'm on engine 35. That's my number. I'm gonna say dispatch from engine 35. Dispatch is gonna say, go ahead. I'm gonna say, I'm on scene of a 2-story single family house with a working fire. So I've informed everybody else that's coming, we have a fire. Then my tactics are gonna be, engine 35 is gonna stretch a 3/4 inch line for fire attack, and I'm gonna name where I'm going. I'm going to the second floor. So we're gonna stretch an 1.75 inches for fire attack on second floor. Once I finish that, I'm gonna say, stand by for a 360. So I'm gonna do a 360 in the house to identify, do we have a basement or any other elements of danger we have outside that house? So that's stage 1. So I'm gonna go with my crew inside to fight the fire. Every other unit that's gonna show up is gonna talk to me, because at the end of the 360, I'm gonna say, engine 35 is in command. I have to take that command. I have to voice it. I'm in command. Engine 35 Alpha is in command. So anybody else that comes in has to report to me first. So engine 30 is gonna come in. They're gonna say, command from engine 30. I'm gonna say, go ahead. Engine 30 is on scene. They don't do anything till I tell them what to do. I might say, I need water supply. I might say, I need you to go to do primary search on the first floor. I might say, I need you to go to the roof and tell me the condition, so forth, so on. Who I'm waiting for is my chief. Chief has to show up. It might be 2 minutes, it might be 10 minutes, but my next authority is gonna be the chief who's gonna show up. And here's the transition, Aaron, how it works. When the chief shows up with his SUV, he's gonna say, command from Battalion 5. I'm gonna say, Battalion 5, go ahead. And now he's gonna tell me, Battalion 5 is on scene. I understand you have engine 33, you have engine 40, you have engine 22. He's gonna list everybody that I said I'm in command. Yeah, then I'm gonna say, yes, chief, that's what I have. And then I'm gonna give him what we call a can. I'm gonna give him a condition. I'm on second floor. We have reached the fire. We have smoke, we have heat. Then I'm gonna give him my needs. My needs, I need to ventilate. Then he's gonna say, copy. Then he's gonna take command by stating this sentence. He's gonna say, Battalion 5 is now going to assume command. So he has taken command from me, and he's gonna say, Battalion 5 now will assume command. So from that point on, he stays in command, however long that incident takes. So he's relieved command. So everybody else now knows, don't talk to Benson, talk to chief. So that's kind of how it sounds like. So there has to be a practiced terminology of how things are gonna sound. Because if you don't have command, then nobody knows who's gonna respond to who.
I want to
Yeah,
jump in
awesome.
on that.
Sorry, I'm gonna actually wrap things up real quick, Howard. I know I'm sure we have lots of other things that we want to talk about, but thank you so much, Benson and Mike, for chipping in on the conversation here. And thank you everyone else for your questions and for your participation today. But we are going to transition it from the presentation to tea time right now. And so there's still going to be plenty of time for these conversations, not cutting anything off too short. But I do just want to thank everyone for coming today and remind everybody that next week we are having part 2 of this, like Howard has mentioned a couple times. It's going to be part 2. And so follow the same link that you followed today to get to this presentation for next week's presentation. And also feel free to always share that link with your coworkers or your colleagues in the fire service. We're really growing, and it's really exciting to see. And so, like I said, thank you so much for coming today, and I will see you next week.